Sarah Martinez wiped the sweat from her forehead as the last whistle of the day echoed across Fort Jackson. The South Carolina heat clung to her skin, but it wasn't the sun that burned the most, it was the fire inside her chest. At just 22, Sarah had proven herself as one of the toughest recruits in her unit. But proving yourself physically was one thing. Earning respect, that was another battle entirely. Her boots thudded against the concrete as she walked toward the locker room. From inside, laughter and voices drifted through the thin walls, the same voices she heard every day. Did you see Martinez trying to keep up on the obstacle course today? One soldier snickered. The others joined in. Sarah froze outside the door, her hand hovering over the handle. She had finished that course in record time, faster than any of them. But somehow, the truth never made it into their stories. She thinks she's so tough, another voice added. Wait until she faces real combat. She'll be crying for her mommy in 5 minutes. The laughter grew louder, sharper, crueler. Sarah's jaw tightened. Then, with a slow breath, she pushed open the door to her own locker room. The women's facility was smaller, quieter, a sanctuary compared to the noise outside. 3 other female recruits were there. Maria, a soft-spoken Texan, glanced up and frowned. They're just intimidated by you, she said, shaking her head. Everyone knows you're the best shot in the entire company. Sarah smiled faintly but didn't answer. The words helped, but they didn't erase the ache. Every day, the same jokes, the same whispers. She had joined the army to serve, to honor her grandfather, a Vietnam veteran who'd taught her that respect wasn't given, it was earned. But some days, she wondered how long she could keep fighting for it. As she folded her uniform, her mind drifted back to her childhood in New Mexico. A small town surrounded by desert and dust storms. While other girls played with dolls, Sarah was outside building forts and waging imaginary wars with the neighborhood boys. Her father, a construction worker, had taught her to fix engines and swing a hammer. Her mother, a nurse, taught her compassion and resilience. But her grandfather, he taught her something deeper. Mija, he used to say, the military needs people with heart, courage, and intelligence. You have all 3. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Now, months into training, she wondered if that was still true. Physically, she could handle anything they threw at her. She could outrun most of the men, outshoot nearly all of them, and had a natural sense of strategy that her instructors noticed early on. But socially, that was the hardest battlefield. The laughter from the men's locker room carried through the walls again. Stories, jokes, weekend plans. Camaraderie, the kind she longed for but never seemed to earn. Jessica, another recruit, sat down beside her on the bench. You know what I think, she said quietly. They talk about you so much because they're scared. You're everything they pretend to be, but you're the real deal. Sarah managed a smile. Jessica wasn't wrong. During drills, Sarah's calm under pressure set her apart. Even Sergeant Brooks, their grizzled instructor, had recognized her leadership early on. But even his approval didn't stop the daily ridicule. Respect was something she had to take, not wait for. As she tied her shoes, Sarah thought back to a conversation she'd overheard earlier that week. 2 senior officers talking about leadership opportunities for exceptional recruits. The words had stuck with her. Maybe that was her chance to prove herself beyond the laughter and whispers. The locker room emptied as the others headed for dinner. Sarah lingered, taking her time. The thought of another meal surrounded by half-hidden smirks didn't appeal to her. She thought about calling her grandfather, but he was 92, and she didn't want to worry him. Instead, she reached for her small green notebook, her quiet companion. Inside, she tracked her progress, her doubts, and her resolve. She flipped to a blank page and began to write. Day 127. Completed advanced marksmanship training. Top score in the company. Led successful navigation exercise. Still facing resistance from peers, but commitment remains strong. Remember why I'm here. She closed the notebook and slipped it into her duffel bag. That's when she heard it. Footsteps. Heavy, purposeful. She turned just as Sergeant Brooks appeared in the doorway. His expression was stern, but not unfriendly. Martinez, he said, voice low and direct. I need to speak with you. Report to my office at 0800 tomorrow morning. Sarah stood straighter, her pulse quickening. Yes, Sergeant. Brooks nodded once, then left as quietly as he came. Sarah stared at the doorway for a long moment, her mind racing. Whatever tomorrow brought, it would be another test, maybe the most important one yet. She squared her shoulders, grabbed her bag, and stepped out into the fading sunlight of Fort Jackson. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't thinking about the laughter behind the walls. She was thinking about what came next.
Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Had she done something wrong? Her mind raced. Maybe it was about yesterday's exercise, when she'd corrected a tactical mistake made by one of the male recruits. A mistake that had cost their unit valuable seconds during the drill. "Yes, Sergeant," she replied, her voice steady despite the unease creeping through her chest. Brooks paused at the doorway, his gaze unreadable. "And Martinez," he added. "Bring your dress uniform, clean and pressed." Then he was gone, leaving Sarah alone with a storm of questions and a pulse that wouldn't slow down. That night, sleep refused to come. She lay awake staring at the ceiling, the rhythmic hum of barracks life echoing around her, boots shuffling, distant laughter, the faint hum of the air vents. But her mind was miles ahead, already standing at Sergeant Brooks's office door. Before dawn, she rose. Every motion was precise, deliberate. Her uniform was immaculate, brass buttons gleaming, creases razor-sharp. Whatever awaited her, she would meet it head-on. The walk to the administrative building felt longer than usual. Each step echoed in the empty corridor, a crisp reminder of the discipline drilled into her bones. She stopped at the open doorway, squared her shoulders, and knocked once. "Come in, Martinez," came the familiar gravel of Sergeant Brooks's voice. She entered, and froze. Brooks sat behind his desk, but he wasn't alone. Near the window stood a tall woman in an officer's uniform, her back turned as she watched the training grounds outside. The silver oak leaves on her collar gleamed under the morning light. "A Major." Sarah snapped to attention. "Private Martinez, reporting as ordered, Sergeant." The woman turned. Her presence filled the room. Major Catherine Reynolds, early 40s, sharp green eyes, streaks of gray in her perfectly tied bun. Her uniform was a story of excellence. Ribbons, commendations, decades of service and leadership. "At ease, Private Martinez," she said, her voice calm but commanding, the kind of tone that carried authority even in silence. "Sergeant Brooks has been telling me some very interesting things about you." Sarah's stomach tightened. Interesting things could mean anything. A reprimand, a transfer. She braced herself. Reynolds flipped open a folder. "Your marksmanship scores, top 2% of all recruits in the past 5 years. Tactical assessments show advanced strategic thinking well beyond your level of training. And your leadership evaluations," she looked up, meeting Sarah's eyes. "Exceptional." Sarah blinked, surprised. This wasn't the conversation she'd been expecting. "Thank you, ma'am," she managed, her voice steady though her mind reeled. Major Reynolds closed the file, folding her hands atop it. "Tell me, Private, why did you join the military?" It was a simple question, but Sarah sensed weight behind it. "To serve my country, ma'am. My grandfather fought in Vietnam. He taught me that freedom demands people willing to defend it." The major nodded. "A noble answer. But I suspect there's more." Sarah hesitated, then met her gaze. "I want to prove that gender doesn't determine ability. That women can lead, on any field, in any fight." Reynolds exchanged a brief glance with Sergeant Brooks. Then she smiled, faint, but genuine. "That's exactly what I hoped you'd say." She rose, moving to a map on the wall dotted with military installations across the country. "I'm here about a new initiative, one that's not yet public. It's called the Advanced Leadership Development Program. The goal is simple: to identify and shape the next generation of female leaders in combat and command." Sarah's pulse quickened. "Only 12 candidates have been chosen across all branches," the major continued. "You've been recommended for one of them." The room felt smaller, the air heavier. Reynolds went on. "This program involves accelerated training in advanced tactics, intelligence analysis, and command operations. Those who complete it successfully will advance directly to officer candidate school and, eventually, into leadership positions traditionally closed to women." Sarah's breath caught. "What would be required of me, ma'am?" Sergeant Brooks finally spoke, his tone steady and serious. "For starters, total confidentiality. This program doesn't officially exist. You'd be transferred immediately to a classified training facility. It's tougher than anything you've faced here, physically, mentally, emotionally. Reynolds nodded. There are risks, Martinez. Real ones. This program is controversial. There are still people in the upper ranks who don't believe women belong in command. If this fails, it could set progress back years. Sarah thought of the sneers and laughter from the locker room. The doubt. The whispers. The way they tried to break her spirit day after day. Maybe this was the test she'd been waiting for, a chance to fight back in the only way that mattered, by proving them wrong. There's something else, Major Reynolds said quietly. If you accept, you'll leave today. No goodbyes. No explanations. Officially, you'll be listed as taking emergency family leave. Your departure must stay off record. Sarah's heart pounded. Leaving meant abandoning her fellow female recruits, the only people who had stood by her. But staying meant remaining invisible. Reynolds stepped closer. If you succeed, Private, you'll be among the first women to command a U.S. Army combat unit. You'll be opening doors for generations to come. But if you fail, her eyes softened slightly. If you fail, the consequences will ripple far beyond you. Sarah looked from the major to Sergeant Brooks, both waiting, silent, expectant. The room seemed to hum with the weight of destiny. When do you need my answer, ma'am? She asked finally. Right now, Brooks replied, his tone flat. Major Reynolds has a transport waiting. You leave in 30 minutes. If you decline, the slot goes to someone else. For a moment, time stopped. Then, Sarah drew a steady breath. The fire inside her, the same fire that had carried her through every insult, every challenge, flared bright again. She saluted sharply. Permission to join the program, ma'am. Reynolds's lips curved into a faint smile. Permission granted, Private Martinez. Welcome to the next chapter of your career. Brooks nodded once, pride flickering in his eyes. Make us proud, soldier. Sarah turned sharply on her heel and exited the office, her heart pounding like a war drum. Outside, the rising sun washed Fort Jackson in gold. She was no longer just a recruit fighting for respect. She was about to become part of something much bigger. Something classified.
Sarah glanced between Major Reynolds and Sergeant Brooks, then toward the map pinned to the wall, a sea of bases stretching across the nation. Somewhere out there, 11 other women were facing the same decision she was. 11 women ready to cross the same invisible line between history and change. Her choice came easily. I accept, ma'am, she said firmly. When do we leave? For the first time, Major Reynolds smiled, not out of formality, but approval. 3 hours later, Sarah was aboard a helicopter slicing through the clouds. The rhythmic thump of the rotors filled her ears as the base below vanished into a blur. The program facility is a decommissioned CIA training site, Major Reynolds explained over the headset. Hidden deep in the Virginia mountains. Officially, it doesn't exist. Sarah peered out the window. Below them, endless forests and winding rivers stretched like veins across the land. She felt as though she were leaving one world behind and flying straight into another. The other 11 candidates arrived yesterday, Reynolds continued. They come from every branch of the military. Different roles, different experiences, but they all have one thing in common with you, Martinez. They're exceptional soldiers who happen to be women, not women trying to be soldiers. Sarah nodded, understanding the subtle but powerful distinction. Throughout her training, she had seen both kinds of soldiers. Some fought endlessly for validation. Others, like her, simply focused on excellence until their results spoke for them. As the helicopter descended through the mist, the facility came into view, an isolated compound nestled in a valley. Several modern buildings connected by walkways, obstacle courses stretching into the treeline, and in the distance, what looked like a mock urban warfare zone. Welcome to Camp Athena, Major Reynolds said as they landed. Named after the goddess of wisdom and war. Fitting, don't you think? A staff sergeant greeted them on the pad and escorted Sarah through the compound. The energy here felt different, sharper, more focused. Every person she passed moved with purpose. Her assigned quarters were simple but clean, a bed, a desk, a locker. On the pillow, a printed schedule awaited. 0500 physical training. 0800 tactical analysis. 1000 leadership simulation. 1400 command presence workshop. Sarah exhaled softly. It was going to be intense, and she was ready. That evening, she met the other candidates in the mess hall. The room buzzed with quiet conversation. 12 women, 12 paths that had converged here. There was Captain Lisa Chen, a combat medic with 3 tours in Afghanistan. Lieutenant Maria Rodriguez, military intelligence, fluent in 6 languages. Staff Sergeant Jennifer Williams, an explosives expert who had disarmed over 100 IEDs. Each woman carried her own scars, victories, and stories of resilience. They chose us to represent every facet of modern warfare, Captain Chen explained. Medicine, intelligence, technical operations, combat. Together, we're the proof that women can excel in all of it. Before Sarah could reply, a commanding presence silenced the entire hall. Colonel Patricia Hayes entered, silver hair pulled tight, eyes like steel. The director of the program. Ladies, she began, her voice cutting through the air. I hope you're enjoying your meal, because it's the last relaxed moment you'll have for the next 6 months. She let the words hang. This program exists because there are leaders who believe women deserve equal opportunity in combat command. But there are also those who would like nothing more than to see you fail, publicly and spectacularly, just so they can say, I told you so. A quiet tension rippled through the room. Sarah felt her pulse quicken, the same fire from Fort Jackson rising again. The training you'll undergo here rivals what special forces candidates endure, Hayes continued. Urban warfare, battlefield medicine, interrogation, psychological operations, strategy, and command. You'll learn how to lead soldiers who may not want to be led by you. But when this is over, they will follow, not because they have to, but because they'll believe in you. The colonel gave a final nod. Tomorrow morning, the real work begins. That night, as the others settled in, Sarah sat alone reviewing her schedule. For the first time since she'd enlisted, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged. Not proving herself, not defending her place, just earning it. 3 months passed. Camp Athena reshaped her in ways she hadn't imagined. Her endurance, her reflexes, her confidence, all sharpened to a razor's edge. The shy recruit from Fort Jackson was gone, replaced by a woman who carried authority in every step. Then, one evening, Colonel Hayes made an announcement. Tomorrow, she said, her eyes scanning the group, you stop being students, and start being commanders. It was time for their first major field exercise. A 3-day live simulation that would determine who was ready to lead. They would each command a squad of 8 male soldiers in a mock urban combat scenario. The soldiers had volunteered for the exercise but hadn't been told the truth, that their commanding officers would be women. This is more than a test, Hayes said. It's a proving ground. The next morning, helicopters lifted the 12 candidates into the mountains, where a sprawling mock city waited below. Multi-story buildings, narrow alleys, Arabic signage, every detail crafted to mimic a real deployment zone. As Sarah stepped off the transport, the air was cool and sharp with mountain wind. Ahead of her, 8 soldiers stood at attention, her squad. All men, watching her approach. Their expressions were unreadable. Sarah adjusted her helmet, gripped her rifle, and stepped forward. I'm Lieutenant Martinez, she said clearly. I'll be your commanding officer for this exercise. The men exchanged quick glances. One raised an eyebrow. Sarah could almost hear their thoughts. A woman. Commanding us. She met their eyes one by one, steady and calm. Out here, she said, you follow orders. I don't care what you think of me. You'll care about one thing, getting your team home in one piece. Understood. There was a pause, then, slowly, each man nodded. In that moment, Sarah realized the true weight of leadership. It wasn't about rank, gender, or reputation. It was about trust, something earned only in the moments that mattered most. As the signal flare streaked into the morning sky, the exercise began. Sarah took a deep breath and gave her first command. The soldier who had once been mocked in a locker room was gone. In her place stood a leader, one who would soon be tested in ways even Camp Athena couldn't prepare her for. This is classified courage, where barriers fall, and legends begin.